So now, why France? So I think everybody is asking these questions. We don't speak English. Coming here was probably a mess for some of you because the taxi drivers are a little bit complex. But you will see with Philippe's introduction that France has major advantages, and this is why we wanted to set it up in France. So please welcome on stage Philippe DEWOST from Caisse des Dépôts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. Thank you, Cole. I should even not have to have a presentation because the introduction was very moving for me. Welcome to France. I'm very honored to speak here, although I don't wear a bird. I'm not a hardcore engineer, yet I do love hardware. My name is Philippe. I'm working with Caisse des Dépôts. I'm running a multi-billion public investment program for France's digital economy across the next 10 years. And I would like to know how many froggies are in the room. Can you raise your hand, please? OK, that's not enough. So next year, we will be more. Yesterday, when Cole did his introduction, he spoke about acceleration using free-fall skydive analogies and all the records being recently broken. And as a forward, I would like to offer you another perspective of on the pace of change that I borrowed from somebody else, so Derek de Kerkhove. I needed to quote him. He spun out that slide in 2008. And I updated it because in 2008, we were still missing the smartphones, the tablets, the Internet of Things, OpenStack, and Open Compute. What's interesting here, and what I want you to appreciate, is that this is about generations. It took mankind 1,700 generations to master language, just 300 to master writing, just 35 to master printing. And each of these new masterships triggered worldwide revolutions in the way mankind behaves. And all of a sudden, it has started to accelerate. You know all that the past century has been also a tremendous one. But what's new, and what I want you to pay attention to, is that this pace of change makes now evolution intra-generational, which means that not only we are living a defining moment, but you should also be conscious that we are, and I'm part of it, the very last generation to know how the world was before. The Internet of Things triggered this revolution that will make batteries everywhere, that will make the need for energy and compute something unparalleled that we need to address if we want to keep energy being available for the masses. So, when you're offered to do an OCP summit talk and you don't know anything about, or almost anything about this, when you're a French guy and when you represent French institutions, you behave as a Frenchman. And so how do you proceed? We are supposed to be very analytical people. We love to put things into boxes. Actually, we tend to want to have things stay into those boxes, which makes us sometimes reluctant to change, but that's another story. But we break topics into parts. So I will first try to address a few personal thoughts and views on compute. And then maybe I will move to open and explain to you why France is key for open compute and why open compute is key for France. So, compute. We're just exiting a hype cycle where it was all about software, and then it was about content, and when it was about context. Those three words I use are just representing the Microsoft decade we are getting out of, the web decade we are getting out of, and the big data one that we are just in the middle of. But OCP and its genesis are reminding us all that there is a big elephant in the room. And this big elephant is hardware. Hardware is not dead. It's not because it's getting cheaper or that it's getting smaller and in some cases invisible. That is, it is not still a driving force that we need to master. When looking backwards from my experience, I decided to show you two machines. The first one on the left is my first portable computer. The one on the right is hopefully my next portable device. Haven't purchased it yet. What's interesting when you compare those two machines that were designed at the time to address more or less the same kind of needs, you see that every defining metric that qualifies them has been multiplied between 250x and 2500x, except two things, price and weight, and both have been divided approximately by 6. To put these things more in context, we are very close to our French nuclear research plant. And in 1985, I remember how proud they were to have acquired a Cray 2 supercomputer. When you compare things, it's funny to see that on the device on the right, the computing power in the machine itself is approximately 50 times the one of the Cray 2 in 1985. So there is power. The other big story that was commented and developed and showcased, actually, yesterday was about storage. And when you look at storage, there are also a few interesting images that are worth a few couple of thousand hard drives. The one I prefer is the one on the left. It's unimaginable to evaluate the weight, the price, the volume, and the ridiculous capacity of the hard drive. This was an IBM hard drive loaded up on a Pan American Airlines plane. IBM is still here. Pan Am has evolved. But yet you could not be able to fit any single good quality image taken from any of your smartphones into this machine. Everybody knows about those defining laws that have been making technology accelerate. You have more Metcalfe and storage, and everybody is aware of that. What I want to point out is a fundamental change that has occurred, I would say, and developed, I would say, across the past 5 to 10 years, and which is the relationship between scale, platform, and pizza teams. The speed at which technology expands, the speed at which platforms conquer the world, should not shade the fact that most major breakthroughs nowadays are led by pizza teams ranging from 12 to 20 people. And if I would have to take a few examples, we had this story yesterday about the genesis of OCP and the team that at Facebook engaged in Project Freedom. If I'm correct, there were about 20 people. They had a 2-year time frame ahead of them, and they had a blank sheet of paper. But 20 people defined in 2 years, over the course of 2 years, what would become the birth, the heart, and the seeds of what OCP is today and what it's becoming. Likewise, another pizza team of approximately 12 people was in charge of the huge migration that occurred from Instagram being run on Amazon Web Services to being imported into Facebook's data center infrastructure. If I'm correct, it took them a few months to prepare that migration. It took them a month to execute it. But the most amazing thing here is that nobody noticed. No single user account was shut down. No warning was addressed to users. And it's as if, from their own words, people would have been taking a car and would have been driving, let's take a French example, from Paris to Nice on the Riviera, in a car, in a Peugeot, let's say that, we're in France, and that's the car they would be in when they arrive in Nice would be a Renault. Every single piece would have been changed without stopping the car on the way and without any of the passengers noticing everything. Again, 12 people. And if I want to take a last example about how 12 people can move things forward, I would like to remind you all that Jean-Marie Verdun and Splitted Desktop, who've been highly appraised over the course of yesterday and yet again with Cole, are the guys who are making these changes and who are the forefront of change because they are doing things. They're not saying how things should be, they are doing them. And this is why we're here. So after these few thoughts on compute, well, being analytical, let's move to open. And as I previously said, hardware is not dead. I hope Mark Andreessen, if you're watching us, don't take it personally. It has become smaller and cheaper. It's sucking the world's energy. It's shaping our future. And I don't know how this paradigm shift connects in a way to those three people faces. I don't know if hare or bird are related. I don't think. But this is all about opening things. First, we're not coming from yesterday. It's been older than that. It started with open infrastructure. The Free Software Foundation paved the way more than 10 years ago. And actually what we have as a result is the foundations of the infrastructure that powers the web. Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP are good examples of infrastructure that have been open sourced and that are running industrial processes all over the world. But we shouldn't stop on LAMP. It goes beyond. There's a second trend, which was a move from protocols to data. The IP protocol, of course, is a very good example of cooperation and group maintenance of what would evolve from an infrastructure point of view, but there is data. And the major change occurred in data that probably is not commented or has not been commented enough, which is how Microsoft decided early in this millennium to open its data formats that were proprietary and that made the fortune of Office, and put a big effort behind XML, making it the lingua franca to exchange data and to exchange structured data formats across applications and services. And to pay a tribute to Microsoft, I would like to thank them for the fact that without such move, without making it possible to read and write Office documents from other applications, I would not have been able to craft this presentation on Keynote on a Mac. And I want to thank them for that. But more seriously, I want to thank them for that also for what they showcased yesterday with their OCS version 2 specification, which shows that Microsoft can be and should be seen as a totally different company when it comes to infrastructure and when it comes to what they're doing on hardware. Now, we addressed infrastructure, we addressed data. We've seen data moving to processes in terms of opening, and that's the whole legacy and the whole effort behind OpenStack. And then there is this amazing expansion of what I call open mind, which is the ability that has been explained several times by several speakers yesterday to just do things yourself if what you find outside is not suiting your needs. Because if you do that, and if you achieve what you expect, then you will have to ask yourself the question of how do I maintain what I've just done? Is this my primary work? Is that my primary goal, or my corporation's primary goal? And then you understand and discover that sharing what you've just done is one of the best ways to make sure it will be maintained and that it will be sustainable and that you will be able to benefit from it. A last but not totally disconnected aspect of opening and of open compute is how it relates to sovereignty. And from a government perspective, we all know that opening military technologies was the first way to give the world lots of critical technology pieces, such as internet, the GPS, or even closer to us, translucent navigation dashboards that have been tested and deployed in military aircrafts before reaching some of our luxury cars. But there is also a big issue of digital sovereignty at stake, because as soon as it's open and as soon as it is certified, it becomes much more auditable, and you have much more control on what you choose to deploy or not, depending on how it behaves and what you need to master. The examples that have been surfacing recently of announcements from a China operating system or the Baikal processor effort in Russia should remind us at the government level that, as the famous Pirelli advertising said, without control, there is no mastership. So now I have been covering open and compute, so why France? Well, what I will try to convince you of during the next 10 minutes is that France is actually very open to compute. Why? Because there is in this country a tremendous amount of skills that sometimes are under the radar, but that can contribute very defining key pieces of the ecosystem. So what do we know in France? We know multi-core, but we do multi-core in a slightly different way. And there are companies around that have been designing chips with a number of core to watt ratio that is just unprecedented. We also know radio decently, and we have talent in France, even if they are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, that are extremely ahead of any technological breakthrough when it comes to 4G LTE efficiency, not only in terms of data throughput, but also in terms of packing, in terms of die size, and energy consumption. Of course, now you know all that we know about OCP. Let me just remind you that Split Desktop is just a bunch of 12 guys located not very far from here, and that have been doing a tremendous job in the OCP Foundation to share and to contribute their masterships in terms of cooling, and they are now touted as OCP gurus. I'm still slightly disappointed to notice that they are more known in the US tech community than they are in France, but that will change. Now, when it comes to large-scale systems, of course, we know petaflops. We have Bull, who is the last European supercomputer manufacturer that has reached petaflop scale and that is now working on its exaflopping roadmap for the next years. They are more and more interested into the HPC stream of open compute, and without making any announcement on their behalf, I would not be surprised that they join the foundation in the few coming months, and with a special focus on HPC. Bull's supercomputing infrastructure is the one that is actually running the 3D modeling system of prestigious European automakers such as Audi, Daimler, or BMW. So whenever those makers design a new car and want to make sure that the renderings are as pleasing as possible for their future drivers and customers, this is run on our systems. They also run several national weather services that usually require huge volume of computation and power. So in a way, I still see them, and we should still see them as true rainmakers. And we know OpenStack. We have funded two sovereign cloud infrastructure companies within the Investments for the Future program. One of them is Cloudwatt, and I mentioned them because Cloudwatt has, from day one, designed its own OpenStack implementation, all in-house. And so this is a pure flavor, no additive platform that has been deployed within Orange data centers in Val d'Oreille. And to go back to smaller companies, there's the last one I would like to pay tribute to. We know very, very high network hardware. Snoot Lab is a small company of 3 people based in Toulouse. They are specialized in 100 gigabit Ethernet hardware, and they run Arduino. So it's an interesting combination of opening hardware and getting very, very high efficiency. So, in a nutshell, in France, we love hardware. And I would not be complete if I were not to mention all these companies that you can see behind that have been focusing on the hardware design and platforms for the Internet of Things. Withings is probably the best known of them because they've been retailed in all Apple Store for the past 3 years. But there are other interesting ones coming. I will mention, for example, Sigfox, that is deploying a very low bandwidth network to power smart meters without any need to connect those smart meters to the grid because they are capable of running on very, very small batteries and last for 3 years. I would mention Gyroptic, the small 3-camera doing 360 panoramic imaging in real time that has been one of the best Kickstarter campaigns of this year, for a French company, they just overreached their commitments by 10 to 15x. I would mention Colibri, which is doing the first connected toothbrush. And when you look at it, it's not a joke. The connected toothbrush is not only a way for parents to monitor how children brush their teeth, it's also a way for them to prevent their dental care bills to go up. And there will be a tremendous opportunity here in medical insurance just to be able to avoid unnecessary costs by just training your children to do the right thing. And so that's a small glance of how we design things, how we make them, how we craft the platforms that will power them and connect them with the ecosystems. So now this one is usually called paradoxes, but I could not resist adding the French word in the front. When you want, as we are trying to do, when you want to make ecosystems grow, you need to address fundamentally 3 paradoxes. The first one is geographical. We all know that internet powers teams that can be working 24/7 all around the globe and move code whenever they want at 0 marginal cost. Problem is, you never design a company from day one by making it virtual. You never design a project, or you never design a community from day one by making it virtual. You need places, you need to gather them, you need locality. And to illustrate that, some of you might have seen this recent announcement of the opening of what will become Europe's most largest, or maybe the world's most largest incubator of companies. This is a project that has been funded by Freeze founder Xavier Niel. It's in Paris in the 13th borough, and he will welcome 1,000 startups on a very, very large facility starting in 2016. That's how we mean gathering people and making sure that exchanges and discussions and projects can spring from people meeting and talking together, as we are doing today over this, across this summit. The second paradox is real time. At the same time, and that's the one that is tough for government officials and for countries as a whole. Innovation, as we've seen, is running very, very fast. It's probably coming faster even than consumers can imagine. So when it comes to political bodies, when it comes to corporations, when it comes to established groups of people, it's even harder for them to master innovation because it constantly breaks the status quo that they had obtained and pushes them to rethink and to reshape continuously what they're doing, which is not something that groups of people are used to, especially when they're French. And now if we scale up to government and to regulation, it's absolutely human, normal, to see that those governments are constantly being shaken and challenged by new companies and new technologies coming in, just because they are operating at a scale and in a time horizon that is not the pace of innovation. So in a way, nobody could have predicted Airbnb or Uber or these companies taking over the world all of a sudden and displacing entire economy sectors in a matter of years, because it was not predictable, because we are not organized for that, which means that we should be very humble. It also means that, however, if you want to develop and to shape ecosystems in your country, you need to think long-term, because an ecosystem builds over several generations of entrepreneurs who need to be sure that they can inspire, invest, trigger other initiatives around them in this location where they started from and where they are hopefully coming back to once they have sold their company or once they have listed it. And that's very important. So which means that from a public interest perspective, we should really think long term. And the last one is also a tough one for constituents, which is to be able to do the right trade-off between emergence, which means, again, that you should not, in digital economy, define boxes and try to desperately put entrepreneurs into those boxes, because they will always start around or beyond the grid that you had designed for them. So you should not plan too much. You should be very humble in listening to what's happening. And at the same time, especially in terms of budgetary constraints, you should focus on being very selective and put all your energy on a very small set of successful entrepreneurs. So, what has it to do with France? Well, everything. And this is, for me, the opportunity to introduce La French Tech. How many of you in this room have heard about La French Tech? Wow, that's quite good. That's quite good. It's a way for us to manifest, to evidence, to make more visible several high-tech ecosystems that are spread all across the country. There's a big one in Paris and its region, of course, but there are other very surprising and interesting ones in cities like Grenoble, Montpellier, Rennes, Nantes, Toulouse. I mentioned a company from Toulouse, where you see entrepreneurs just shaping the world as they need to shape it, and now talking more and more with local officials just to make sure that these ecosystems emerge together. And so La French Tech will be the brand that we use abroad it will be our Silicon Valley, in a way. It's a way for us to remind the world that there is a tremendous amount of talent in France, that there are very successful companies, such as Criteo, that we listed on NASDAQ a few months ago, but there are many, for one Criteo, there are many others waiting to come. And it's accelerating, actually. And we are helping this acceleration mechanism by various ways, financing accelerators across the country, and there will be 200 million euros devoted to those investment schemes across the next 10 years. So in a nutshell, I hope I have convinced you, but most of you were already, that hardware is really shaping the world. The second, and in a way, as I think Oscar Wilde said, to paraphrase him, news of hardware death have been greatly exaggerated. It's not because it has become smaller or even invisible, or because it has become cheaper, so perceived as being almost free, that it is not something we should keep an eye on. The second belief I want to share with you is that the only limit is talent. And I hope I have convinced you by now that we have plenty of talent across the country. So when I say welcome to La French Tech, I mean that we hope, and we truly hope, to see OCP flourish in France and France become the epicenter of what will be happening in Europe in terms of spreading this community and having businesses start and be sustainable on this OCP effort. And I do form the wish, that next year you will all be back here, and that we might be even more with more French people. So again, officially, I want to welcome OCP to La French Tech. So, time now for me to thank you all for being here. I first need to thank École Polytechnique for this wonderful setup and welcoming us in the Saclay Plateau. Some of you have noticed that the whole area around is under massive development, which means two things. One is that we are now on the verge of concentrating and bringing back together most engineering schools and universities in this large area, meaning that the concentration, the density of tech talent around Paris-Saclay will be increasing massively across the next 2 to 3 years. Second, there is still land available, which means that we will gather and have more and more bleeding-edge R&D labs. Some of them are already installed here, but more will come. And so we have the possibility to form a very, very high-level, high-tech cluster around Paris-Saclay. And last, I would like to thank the OCP Foundation for this impressive summit organization. They've done a hell of a job, and I want really to address my kudos to Cole and his team for making that possible. So one last word. I would like all of you, I don't know if Jean-Marie is backstage. He was not expected to know that, but Jean-Marie, if you are backstage, and if you could come back, else we will do that without you. I would like to ask you to do a standing ovation for Jean-Marie Verdun, because without him, without his resiliency, without his dedication, none of us would have been here for those 2 days. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, go. Here's the guy. Come on. Here's the guy. Not a problem.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Philip, thank you very much.